Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. This is Naomi, the How To Chick, coming on to you this Wednesday night. And it is September, and I thought I was taking tonight off because this week is my anniversary and I was supposed to be out of town. But plans have a way of doing what plans do. So I'm here, and since I'm here, I'm here. Fall is here, my favorite season of all. I'm enjoying the weather change, but guys, I'm really tired. And I know that I'm not by myself in this season where it just feels like it's everything everywhere all at once, all the time, and it doesn't stop. There's a constant cycle of things that should be doing, things that need to be done, things that must be done, and juggling and balancing and figuring out which to do sometimes leaves us a little short, a little stressed, a lot irritable, and worried about whether we're leaving the best impression in the places that we have to show up. And I know when that happens for me, I get a little anxious and I also tend to get quiet. That is my default when it is that I know that where I am mentally, and I always talk about the components of health and being what they are mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. I'm not in balance. And if I'm not okay, I will simply say that I don't always show up as my best self. Snappish, irritable, annoyed, not able to relate well with others. And in this season, the pressures of life have come to a high point in many areas of my life. And God has been taking me through this thing. And if this is your first time catching one of my lives, then you know my name is Naomi. I go by the How To Chick. I'm a child of God, a wife, a mom, an attorney, a coach, a mentor, and a speaker. But most importantly, I believe that we can do anything and we can't do everything. And we have to choose wisely. I am also an ordained elder, and so my worldview is heavily colored by my belief system. My faith is the context of my life, and my relationship with God and my relationship with myself as it relates to my relationship with God are very important. And so tonight I'm going to talk to you about seasons where it feels imperative to speak your mind, seasons where you want to tell everyone around you, from your kids and your spouse to your coworkers who aren't pulling their weight, how you feel and where they can go and what they can do when they get there because you're tired and you're tired of repeating yourself. You're tired of going in circles with people and you're tired of feeling unheard and misunderstood. And I know that that is a common sentiment for moms. It's a common sentiment for women in leadership. It's a common sentiment for women everywhere. We feel unheard. Today, I watched a video of a lady who was doing a vow renewal with her spouse. And apparently, her spouse had slammed cake into her face when they got married. And for the vow renewal, she asked for one thing. She asked that he would not smush the cake onto her face. She had all of her friends there. I guess these were the women who had been by her side when they were married and who were bridesmaids. And if not, they were just her friends in this season. And she was asking them to record this end of the vow renewal when they once again ate cake. And she wanted to have a photo where cake wasn't smashed in her face. Again, one request. I'll leave you guys to understand that what he did was immediately smear cake all over the side of her face. And long story short, one of her friends tells him, I never wanted this to be a vow renewal. If I had my way, this would have been a divorce party. And then his wife comes over and she says, okay. One word, okay. And then she says, you can have your cake and eat it too. And she gives him his ring. And I think for a lot of people who saw that video, it really resonated how it feels when you make request after request, when you're pretty clear with what you want and you think your wants or your desires or an expectation, or your expectations are in alignment with what the person has capacity to do. Because we're not talking about asking your husband who works, as a sanitation worker or a police officer to take you on a trip to Ibiza or Fiji for your 5-year anniversary. We're not talking about asking your husband who works a demanding job trying to clock 60 to 70 hours a week as an attorney to spend 3 afternoons with the kids, pick them up from school so that you can rest. We're not asking that, right? We're making reasonable compromises, and yet sometimes we feel unheard, even there. And that really resonated with me because there have been a lot of times in my life where I felt I was clear. I asked for what I asked for, and I didn't ask. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "You have not because you ask amiss." And that gets used out of context sometimes. And I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to use it a little bit out of context right now because sometimes, again, we ask things that are unreasonable, that are not in someone's capacity. They don't have the bandwidth to be safe. They don't have the bandwidth to be responsible or reliable in a certain way. But if you're asking somebody something that they have capacity for, you're giving them reasonable notice, they have the capacity, the ability to do it. What they're missing is the one piece, right? And that piece is willingness. And that willingness, I'm gonna like, I had to spend some time on this week. I had to deconstruct this and I went backwards. Why is it that not having the small things done, not getting those little things that I'm asking for, why is it that that bothers me more, right? Sometimes than not getting the big things. And I thought about it and I thought about it and I journaled about it. And I realized that not having someone honor small, seemingly insignificant requests that we make shows us in our minds and our spirits how they really feel about us. And I'm talking about simple things. I remember, and I've talked to you guys about this before, when I first got married, my husband used to leave his socks all over the house. It drove me absolutely bananas. I thought I was going to stroke out from how angry I got about it. And I'm so grateful that God got me to the point where I was able to get over that, because my boys do that too. And like, I see them walking around the house with one sock on, and I just want to scream, "Where is the other sock?" But I asked him, "Put your sock in the hamper. I need you to put your socks in the hamper. I'm tired of finding socks in the kitchen, under the dining room table." And, I was finding socks everywhere. It was so frustrating. And I remember recognizing at a certain point that he did not have the capacity to honor that request. He'd been doing this his whole life. I actually think it's hereditary. I recognize now that my father-in-law does it, but I had to move past that. But if I ask you something that I know you have the capacity to do, something that I know that feels so simple to me, like, please, when you're finished eating, don't leave your fork on your desk. Don't leave food sitting around. Just take your plate to the kitchen. And I'm talking, listen, as parents, we do this. We repeat ourselves all day long. But I'm giving simple examples. But for this lady, it was very simple. Don't smash cake in my face. And women in the comments were riled up. It's disrespectful. It's the only thing she asked for her vow renewal. How could he do that? And the men were very, very uniformly shrugging it off as no big deal. And I saw where the disconnect happened. The disconnect happened where the man, her husband, was forced to honor her wishes over his. And that's what happens. Sometimes, instead of saying, "I'm going to do this for this other person to be happy," instead, we say, "Why don't they want me to be happy?" Even when it's a situation where the thing that they're asking for is not something we were thinking about, it's not something we have a high value on, it's not something that's that important to us. And I don't think this was that important to him, because, again, from what her friend said, this was the context of their relationship, which was disrespect and not listening. But for those of us who are in marriages which have normal ebbs and flows, in relationships that have normal ebbs and flows, when there are things that we ask for that are dishonored, it makes us feel as though we are not valued. It makes us feel as though we are not respected, appreciated, loved. We put a lot on the little things, ladies. And I know that every person is not exactly like me. You don't put a lot on the one thing that I may put a lot on. I'm more of a holiday, anniversary, date night girl. But, for some people, it's like, wow, he remembered to leave a warm towel for me in the bathroom. Wow, he remembered to scrape the ice off my windshield in the morning. Wow, I really appreciate that he packed my lunch. And my husband does that for me a lot. But when we ask for something and we think it's reasonable, it's small, but it's important to us and we don't get it, there's a process that happens, right? Because in the video that I watched, the lady literally took her rings off, dropped them at her husband's feet, told him to have his cake and eat it too, and walked away. And I understand that there, just in context, this could have been clickbait. I don't know these people. In context, I understand if this was the pattern of their relationship and if this was a vow renewal they were doing in front of all of their friends and family, and this was the only ask. In context, I understand it. But there are times when these things happen to us and we go there. We go from 0 to a million without examining what we talked about last week, which is the confrontation quotient, which is talking about how much we value the relationship and how much we value the outcome. And so the one time that our husband doesn't fill up our gas tank for the week, we automatically in our minds go to, he doesn't love me anymore. How could he do this? And I'm not saying that it's always going to be something that insignificant. And I'm not saying it's irrational. I am not. What I'm saying is our brains do this because we think it's reasonable. We think it's logical. We think it's a small thing. And we start equating it, right, with the value that we hold to this person. And today, as I watched that video and as I really processed what was happening, I was told in my spirit that this is the time, ladies. This is the time, moms. This is the time with your kids, with your spouse, with those people on your job to get quiet. It's not the time to blow everything up. It's the time to get quiet. It's the time to decide and to take some time to process exactly why it bothered you so much. So if it's a situation that you know right away, this was the only thing I requested, they were perfectly capable of doing it, and them not doing it shows me how they feel about me. It's time to process how to have that conversation. But if it's a situation where you've asked somebody to do one more thing and they've let you down, forgotten about it, even though they did have the capacity, this gets back to our confrontation triangle. And sometimes it's something that matters, right? I always used to watch those old shows in the 70s and 80s, and there's this old trope that the husband always forgets the anniversary. Like last minute, he's trying to throw something together. You know, it was on all the shows. I liked like King of Queens, and there were so many. I don't even know why I threw that out there because I'm not going to be able to give you 3 more because my brain and names don't go together. But they forget. Last minute, they're trying to call in favors, run around begging people to open up the store so they could get their flowers, or trying to pay for a dinner reservation somewhere. And I used to always think, who forgets their anniversary? How could somebody do that? But these things happen. And so the point that I'm making is we have to take some time and step back and view the context of the entire relationship. And we have to view the context of the relationship not through the emotions of what we feel in the moment, but through the truth that we take time in our quiet space to present to ourselves of who the person is and how they have shown up. Because this doesn't just cut one way. This isn't just us giving grace. In that moment, I could see on the bride's face. It's like when you're watching a movie, right? In that final scene, it's been a thriller and we don't know who did it. And they're trying to figure it out. And they start playing all the scenes back to back to back to back to back to back to back. Everything lines up. And you realize this person never loved me. This person never respected me. This person never showed up for me. But in your quiet space, when you're evaluating the thing that he didn't do, the way that you were let down, the thing that wasn't done the way that you asked or was done differently, it's important to look at it in context of everything that you have asked. That person's capacity, are you taking them out of context and asking them for more than they're capable of doing? And to look at the sum total of the relationship and decide whether it's worth a conversation And again, I'm not just talking about marriages here, whether it's worth a conversation. If it's somebody you work with, unfortunately, unless you want to just quit and get another job, you're going to have a conversation. Or whether it's time to reevaluate your role in that person's life. And that's the importance of getting quiet, because our hearts and our feelings and our emotions are going to try to teach us and tell us to react, to immediately act on the feeling and the triggering that happens when we feel betrayed, when we feel abandoned, when we feel like someone has done something to us. Instead of reacting, get quiet. Be quiet. Evaluate what was done, evaluate the context, evaluate your relationship with a person, evaluate the outcome that you truly want. And sometimes a repair is necessary. Sometimes you're going to have to ask for an apology. And sometimes you're going to have to be willing to accept that that person never saw your ask as the big deal that you saw it as. And you may have to, and there are couples who have lived in conflict with like this for decades, for years, for months, for very long, uncomfortable periods. So are you going to have a conversation about it? Are you not going to have a conversation about it? Are you going to accept the apology that you didn't get? Or are you going to fail to have the conversation, fail to request the apology and speak your feelings, even in a rational and calm way, and hold it over that person's head? Because there's a commonly known phenomenon that happens when a woman's fed up, right? She stops talking, she gets quiet. And there are people who exist like that. This isn't a place to exist, and this isn't a place to stay. This is a place for evaluating, and it doesn't take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or a year to figure out the value that that person places on you in the relationship and the value that you place on the relationship, unless there is trauma, there is abuse of any kind, and you are trying to figure out a safe exit strategy. But that's not time that you're being quiet to evaluate. That's time that you're making a plan. And those are two different things. But I'm just urging us to not burn things down. And this is no shade to that woman, because again, I saw her face. She did her evaluation. It just didn't take her that long. And guess what? She didn't yell and scream. She didn't curse him out. She didn't key his car. She didn't pour sugar in his gas tank. Now, she may take him to the courthouse, and that's between her and her lawyer. But getting quiet and listening to what your emotions are telling you and challenging your emotions with facts and truth are the surest way to make sure that you don't destroy a relationship in a moment where you are triggered by a fear of betrayal or abandonment, and by a thoughtless or careless action as opposed to one that was malicious or negligent. Guys, this is a season, and I'm really, really quiet in this season. But there are reasons for that. And one of those is that reacting instead of responding thoughtfully, prayerfully, and under the guiding of the Holy Spirit is the quickest way to do real damage in relationships and situations and spaces where you were intended to have kingdom impact. So I'm encouraging you tonight to take time to evaluate the context in silence. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And there are some things that can't be undone. And one of those is unringing the bell after it's been rung and unsaying the word after it's been said. Have a wonderful evening. I will not be with you next week for Wisdom Wednesday. I will be out of town for my anniversary, so I will see you in October, but not next week. Good night.